All right. So inquiring minds want to know, how bad is sugar actually for you, and how addictive is it?
Okay, so sugar is one of the most damaging things we can put in our body. So this is, like right off the bat, this is a pretty big one. Um, when we look at across the board, when we look at all chronic illness, whether it be like obesity or we're looking at cardiovascular disease, even dementia, we see that it all starts with a baseline of uncontrolled blood sugar. And that is stemming from, years and years of having like high consumption of sugar, specifically high fructose corn syrup and fructose in general is going to be one of the worst ones that we want to really stay away from. When we
Mhm.
look at athletes, though, there's a little bit of wiggle room we can play with. And,
Right.
why I say that is because they're obviously for individuals who really exercise a lot and they are trying to improve performance. They need so much glucose throughout the day. They're having to run off of carbohydrates. So I even like some of my athletes, like right before, a big performance, a game, a match, whatever it might be, to take like a quick burst of sugar. It helps them and it helps to give them that nice little adrenaline push. I even like them to do it toward the end of their game. There's like actually some good, I read something about Travis Kelsey because I do some studying on professional athletes. And one of the things he does is right before the fourth quarter, like he like pounds a bunch of gummy bears.
Mhm.
So this is something that, pushes him for that last 15 minutes, or we know it's longer than 15 minutes, but 15 minutes of, that fourth quarter to get you kind of moving. So I will say this too about sugar. There's a lot we can talk about, but one of the main things about sugar is if you are going to have it, the best time to have it is actually earlier in the day, and it's actually after a workout.
Okay.
And why that is because your body is depleted from your muscle glycogen starts to dip down. And so this is the time where those carbohydrates are coming in and your body's going to use it immediately and it'll start to build up your glycogen storage. So it's not a bad idea to have, if you like it, to have it sometime right after a workout or, after a game, or like I said, in the morning, we're more insulin sensitive. So it's not going to wreak havoc on our blood sugar like it would if we had it at like 9 o'clock at night. Then we're causing some problems.
Right. So, like, what are some of the immediate effects of sugar on your body? So let's say, you're having that bowl of ice cream at 9 o'clock at night. Um, and what does that do to you immediately and then through the night? And then how does it kind of put you behind when you're going to perform, your morning workout, or
Yeah,
some high school kids, they'll have an 8 o'clock game. Their first game in a tournament will be at 8 a.m. And
right.
so talk about like setting yourself up for success or failure based on what you're doing the day before.
Yeah, so that's a great point. As I mentioned previously, like sugar at night is one of the worst times to have it. And so this is what happens when you consume sugar. So as soon as you consume it, your body has to work uh, to send all of that glucose that you just consumed because it's going to break it all down, right? It's going to break down. And sugar is kind of real easy. It doesn't take very long to absorb and digest because it is in, it's in glucose form. It's already there. So it's going to increase your blood sugar levels. And this can be an okay thing. As I said, if you need kind of quick energy, you're going for a walk or you're doing some type of exercise, this isn't bad because you can use that energy immediately. But if you have it, say at night, you're having that bowl of ice cream, it'll raise your blood sugar levels, which will then cause your body to release insulin. And what insulin does is insulin's job is to transport all of that glucose to cells throughout your body. And your cells are going to take that, they're going to take that sugar And they're either going to say, like, I don't need this right now. You're trying to wind down, you're trying to go to bed, or you're dormant at the moment. So we don't need this energy. So instead of your body kind of using it immediately for energy, it'll store it as body fat. When we look at the liver is kind of responsible for packaging all these things up. The liver only has maximum amount of glucose it can store. So if that glucose storage is low, like you haven't had much to eat yet, or maybe you just worked out, so you need some more, glucose storage, glycogen storage. What will occur is your liver will take that, it'll store it, and it'll also store it in your muscle. But your body only has a limited capacity of glycogen storage. And so if you exceed that amount, if you don't need it at the moment, that's when we turn it to body fat, and that's when we will store it. So when we look at having it at night, once again, that's going to increase our blood sugar levels. But the immediate effects of that is, one, if we have increased insulin when we go to bed, this disrupts our sleep cycles. So we get really kind of poor quality sleep. And then if you're looking at the next day, you're trying to do something early in the morning, you'll feel like a little bit more lethargic because, you've had to work a little bit harder. Your body had to work a little bit harder to do something with that sugar that you consumed. But the other weird thing it does, and most people will notice this, is it actually makes you hungrier in the mornings. And so you feel like a little bit weaker and you're craving more carbohydrate, you're craving more sugar. So
Right.
this kind of starts to create a more vicious cycle. The best food, since we're on this, the best food, if you're looking at like an athlete, to eat before you go to bed, for the average person, I like people to have like a 2 to 3 hour window of not eating before they go to bed. And this is just helpful so that you can have nice circadian rhythm throughout the night. You can go through all 4 stages of sleep. And you want to build up human growth hormone, which is how you're getting that through, stage 3 and REM sleep. So you want that process to work well. If you are an adolescent or you're an athlete or you're going through periods of growth, one of the best foods that you can consume right before bed is actually casein protein. And why that is because when you go to bed, your body is breaking down muscle protein that you've created throughout the day. And if you work out, you lift weights, and you're trying to make all these gains, you're trying to put on some more muscle mass, or you're trying to increase lean tissue, you're breaking it down at night. So you're kind of nullifying all the stuff you did. But if you have some casein protein, it's a very slow releasing protein. So as you sleep throughout the night, what it does is it helps so that you don't dip down into too much breakdown. Instead, you stay more even, and that you won't find yourself losing weight or you won't find yourself losing muscle. I think that's one of the biggest things that I see with young athletes, especially young males, right? They're like, how do I gain weight? I can't seem to, eat enough. And one of the best things to do is to have that high casein protein before you go to bed. And it could be like 30 minutes to an hour. It doesn't have to be like, you know, 5 minutes. You're trying to eat something.
Right.
Um, and those foods, like casein protein, you can find it. Like one of my best sources is actually cottage cheese. So
Okay.
I know that's not like everybody's favorite thing, but if you have like cottage cheese with like a little bit of, you can whip it up so it has more yogurt consistency, and you can have that with some berries or some nuts. You can also, I have a 14-year-old son who's an athlete, and he's always trying to put on, more muscle. So I give him a casein protein shake, or he makes his own casein protein shake. I buy it for him. I'll just say that.
Mhm.
I buy it for
Right.
him so he has that every night before he goes to bed. So I think this is like something huge. Instead of looking at that bowl of ice cream, how can we
Hmm.
adjust and do something different that's going to help us perform better?
Okay. What are some other sources of casein protein? Is it primarily from dairy or?
It's primarily from dairy, so we're gonna find it in like milk products. Like other good sources. I'm sure you've heard of like the Core Power drink.
Hmm.
It's a core power protein drink. This is very popular among like young athletes, like Muscle Milk. Those actually have a decent amount of casein protein as well. But you're mainly getting it from you're getting it from dairy sources, or you can buy a casein protein that is made from dairy.
Okay. But like a Greek yogurt or skyr or something
You can
like
get,
that?
yeah, you can get a little
Okay.
bit of casein from Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt's going to be decently high in protein as well, so that's also going to help.
Okay.
Um, Maybe you can mix in the cottage cheese with it, so you get like the double
Okay.
amount.
So cottage cheese is like the place to get it if you're not just
Yeah,
buying
you know what
a
I do?
protein.
You know what also a trick is with cottage cheese is you, like I said, you can whip it. It has the consistency of sour cream or yogurt. You
Hmm.
don't know it's cottage cheese.
Right,
But
right.
it's more of a texture thing for people. But
Okay.
also, back to that casein protein shake, you can scoop some cottage cheese in your protein shake and mix it up. So now you got like a creamy, you know,
Hmm.
more satisfying drink that, like
Gotcha.
I said, kids like it. You can even make it the consistency of ice cream.
Whoa. So, and it's okay to eat it with berries,
Yeah.
with
Yeah,
with a
having a
little bit
little
of,
bit of carbohydrate like that is
right.
still going to be good for you.
Okay.
Um, what we don't want is like direct sugar. So, that's going to be in the form of like candy or chocolate cake. I'm trying to
Right.
think of dessert like foods.
Right.
But if you're having it in the form of berries, for example, berries are great because berries have some fiber. And the carbohydrate, especially for young athletes, is still going to be good. We want them to up their carbohydrate levels. So,
Hmm.
especially their fiber, they need that. They don't want fiber before a game or before a practice, but they need to be consuming it other times a day.
Right. I want to back up and talk about sugar one more time.
Okay, yeah.
So there's high fructose corn syrup. There's sugars from fruits. So define kind of what is fruit or sugar that's, okay, and sugar that's not okay.
Okay, so I always don't like to necessarily label like bad foods, this and that,
Hmm.
because essentially like there's still a place to consume some of it in the diet. High fructose corn syrup is the absolute worst. So we'll start there. We will find high fructose corn syrup in sodas, a lot of
Hmm.
sodas. We will find it in processed foods. We will find it in what I would almost consider not real food. Okay, so it's not a natural source. This is like a man made in a factory, mass produced sugar that wreaks havoc on our entire metabolism. Your liver uses it stimulates your liver to produce fat in the liver. In fact, this was one of my test questions on my exam, last test, so I could say that we passed this. But like, what is high fructose corn syrup doing immediately? That's the most immediate effect it's doing. It
Hmm.
stimulates your liver to produce more fatty liver. This is how we see people who don't drink alcohol have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This is years and years of high fructose corn
Hmm.
syrup consumption. When we look at it in the form of, it's going to be found in some natural sources like fruits, and we're going to see it in, even things like some sweeteners like honey has it, tiny bit of maple syrup. Those are not going to wreak havoc on us. And why? It's because it's such a small amount. The
Hmm.
only caveat to that would be if somebody had, like irritable bowel syndrome, or they had to consume what we would call a low FODMAP diet. I would take out some high fructose fruits and
Okay.
things like honey and sweeteners, but I would not do that for the average person. There's no need to, because you are just getting such a small amount and it is a natural source. Your body actually knows the difference. Your liver knows the difference. So it's going to take this high fructose corn syrup and it's going to be like, like red lights, sirens are going off in your body. Like, we don't know what to do with this. So boom, we're going to make it dietary
Okay.
fat. Or we're going to store it as, triglycerides. We're going to circulate more triglycerides in your blood. We're going to store it in our liver. And like I said, your liver can store an endless amount of fat, cannot store an endless amount of glycogen, glucose.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, so yeah, soda obviously is not the way to go. Um, what if, they're substituting diet or sugar free
Diet soda.
or Coke Zero or something like that? What are the effects of that? Is it Is it kind of a healthy substitute as it's marketed?
No, it's not. That's
Right,
the short answer.
right.
Um, okay, so why it's not? Numerous reasons. One of the big reasons is because you're putting it in your body, and your body, your brain, and your insulin and your hormones, they have a response to sweetness. So as soon as you put it in your mouth, your brain is like, sweet, 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 sweet. And your insulin's like, okay, great, time for me to come out. And then it realizes, like, wait a minute, there's no calories with this. There's no glucose for me to break down. There's
Hmm.
nothing for me to absorb here. So then it gets mad at you. That's the best way to say it. It gets mad. And it tells you, well, you told me you were giving me something sweet, and that's not fair. I want that sweet. So imagine it's like a 2-year-old throwing an absolute biggest tantrum ever. I want sugar, 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 sugar. So it'll
Right,
keep like demanding that you give it sugar to make it happy because you've told it you've given it sugar, but you didn't actually follow through.
right.
So it induces a mass amount of cravings. That's what it does, number one. It's going to really increase the cravings. Um, it's also because you're giving it that sweet signal, it does cause a little bit of an insulin response. So when insulin goes into your bloodstream and there's not glucose there to do anything with, it will drastically lower your blood sugar. So then you can get to points where you feel kind of low and more lethargic because you don't your blood sugar is so low you're at risk for hypoglycemia. um, Finally, the other thing it does is actually there's two more things. Okay, the other thing it does is it's going to cause a little disruption in your gut microbiome. So your microbes, which are, a lot of gut bacteria that are living in your GI tract and that are really good for you, you want like a nice diversity. It hates artificial sweeteners. We see that the microbial population will drastically shift for people who have too much artificial sweeteners. This is also one of the number one causes of sugar cravings throughout the day is overconsumption of artificial sweeteners. And then finally, like the World Health Organization has also come out and said, like, look, we think there's a potential high cancer risk. And they specifically cite liver cancer. um, when they're testing this, it has to be like a pretty decent amount. Like we're looking at like over eight diet sodas a day. So it would be kind of hard to get there, but some people can get there. But also, my question to that is if they're finding it with that amount in a shorter period of time, what if we're just consuming a few over decades, right? What does that do to our cancer risk? So they can't necessarily link all of it, but it is associated, or they are saying like we might want to put the brakes on this. If you also know that there's some certain sweeteners that are not legal in many other countries except in the US. They rigorously test their products a little bit more than we do, and we like to
Right.
just keep things on the shelf until we see that it's causing people to die and at larger amounts. And then we'll be like, oh, whoops, maybe we were wrong about this.
Right. Right.
So that's always a concern.
Yeah, and it's an addictive thing, right? I mean,
Yeah,
not to make this whole thing about sugar, but it's probably something that a lot of kids and their parents
yeah.
are kind of hooked on, and it's important to hear all of what you're saying to kind of wrap your head around the effects that it's having on us as human beings, I guess.
Yeah, I think the cravings, like cravings are a beast.
Mhm.
One of the major reasons we have cravings too have to do with, I talked about the gut population. But if we have like when I say low diversity, meaning we only have like one or two types of major bacteria kind of taking over our gut, that causes us to have cravings for things that we don't necessarily want to be eating. Um, if our gut is nice and diverse, imagine you have like a bunch of little workers in there that all have different specialties, right? They don't cause us to have these cravings. So we can induce cravings by eating a lot of the foods that we shouldn't be. Or we can have them from time to time, really enjoy them, and then walk away and not have them for a few weeks, so you can have like a nice balance where you don't want to like, I'm never eating that again, but kind of have it from time to time and don't tell yourself it's completely off limits. Like allow yourself to have some foods that you still enjoy and bring you some happiness.
Right,
Sure.
exactly. Um, all right. Well, let's get back to athletes.
Okay.
So, these questions are from my kid, and
Okay.
he and he probably knows the answers. I hope so, but he said that something interesting to ask would be the best meals to eat up leading up to a match, or a big bout of exercise, or something like that, where you are going to have to put out a big effort over a sustained amount of time. And obviously that varies if you're a 100-meter runner
Right.
versus a
Yeah.
soccer player or a tennis player who has to go to 2 hours plus. So
Right. Yeah. So we're talking about
um, yeah,
a whole
yeah,
variety here.
exactly. So maybe just focus on someone who is an athlete who's going to put in an hour plus, and what are the best things to fuel yourself with.
Okay. So, I actually teach a class, Nutrition and Human Performance, which is very detailed. We go through this. Like, we will
Mhm.
spend weeks on different sports, pregame this, pregame that. And he has not taken that class. He should have.
Okay.
But this is a good way to answer it. Okay, so here's my best advice. Obviously, every sport is different, and there's going to be, multiple considerations. And, I just had one of my former students like send me a text a few weeks ago. He's now pitching um, for Cal Berkeley. So he's moved on, he's in grad school. And he's like, I'm feeling low energy, something's not right. So he called me and we went through it. I gave him like 20 minutes. I'm like, do this, fix this, fix this. And I'm not kidding, it was on game day. That day he had his longest career outing on the mound. So I was like, something worked.
Were
Okay, so here's what we want to do.
you like, damn, I'm good?
I
Of
I was well, I wanted to take all the credit, but I was like, well,
course. Yeah.
he pitched really well. But I
Yeah.
did, later on, I texted him. I'm like, so it worked, right? And he's like, yes, I'm on it.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so a couple things to unpack there. One, in the morning, so when we are like, say, usually when we look at athletes, they're not performing till later on. However, we have young athletes that may be performing first thing in the morning. So there's
Hmm.
some considerations when you are looking at, if you have like 4 or 5 hours in advance, I would say 4 hours in advance, 5 hours in advance, you want a nice, well rounded meal that has good carbohydrates, that also contains protein, and that also contains dietary fat. You want all three because you need this meal to sustain you for almost the entire time leading up to your performance. So, what would be a good example? Avocado toast, couple eggs, maybe even like a side of fruit, maybe even some yogurt in there. It depends on how hungry you are. A nice big omelet would also be good with a piece of toast and some fruit. Think like I do like eggs for breakfast. I like eggs for athletes because it's a great way to get in good protein that has so many rich vitamins and minerals. It's like one of the most perfect foods you can eat. So I do like eggs in the morning. Now leading up to the match. Okay, so when we're a couple hours out, we want to have something that also has moderate protein and a decent amount of carbohydrate. So that could be maybe like a smoothie, like a fruit smoothie with maybe some Greek yogurt, and then you're throwing in a little bit of protein powder in there. Okay, that should be plenty. If you are like an hour out and you're like, I need I'm kind of feeling a little bit hungry and I want something to sustain me. This is where you want kind of higher carbohydrates. So this could be something like yogurt and berries, yogurt and granola, something that's still light but is also going to be lower in fat. You want it to be lower in fat, and you want it to be lower in fiber. You can't have fat and fiber. You want to keep it a good couple hours before you perform, because it can cause a little bit of GI upset. And the other reason is it lingers in your GI system. It lingers in your stomach a little bit longer, and you don't want to feel heavy. So you want to make sure that you are having those foods, but it's earlier in the day. Um, and then afterward, you got to make sure you have it afterward. When you are looking at like first thing in the morning, like say you're going to, say you have like a soccer game, like I'm just thinking of like a kid has an 8 a.m., 8:30 a.m. soccer game and they're up at 6:30. Something kind of easy and nice to have is like a chocolate milk or a like I like those little core power kind of protein drinks, right? It's going to have a decent amount of protein. It's going to have some carbohydrate, so they'll be ready to go. And then you follow up the game with a nice balanced meal that has the protein, that has the fat, that has the fiber, that has all the elements. Um, when you are like, I do this for like football players, or I would do this for a soccer player, like 10 minutes before you want some quick glucose just to get you like amped up for the game. I like raisins. I like a spoonful of honey. I like dried fruit, kind of something quick and easy that is like immediately kind of bumping up your blood sugar. If you are having a high carbohydrate meal and it's 2 or 3 hours before your performance and it doesn't have any protein and it's really low in fat, you're actually going to have a blood sugar crash and you're going to feel lower energy. So you have to make sure that the timing works out. If you are having this higher carbohydrate meal, it has to be only within the hour. If you want to feel more sustained, have that bigger meal earlier, then have something kind of light but higher in carbohydrate an hour before, maybe a little bit of protein. And then once again, right before, have some quick. Like I said, raisins are great. Raisins are great. Dried cherries, things that have like a high amount of glucose. I also like them to have a little something at halftime. Okay, because they are going to have to push, especially if we look at soccer, right? They have another 45 minutes. So giving them something like this is where Gatorade is helpful, or some type of electrolyte drink that has some carbohydrate in it. So it doesn't make them feel full. It's hydrating and they can immediately go perform. I should say, I mentioned Gatorade. Gatorade's not my favorite. I should also caveat that. There's other really good electrolyte drinks out there that have a lot of glucose in them that aren't full of like artificial coloring and weird flavors that we don't need. I would also say this, this can lead us into another topic about like electrolytes, but those beverages, like electrolyte beverages, are really not needed unless you are exercising for 90 minutes or longer.
Gotcha. Um, what about gels and that sort of thing?
Yeah, gels would be great. That would be another something that if it was halftime, like football players would do well with that.
Mhm.
Endurance athletes, so any triathlete, any cyclist, any marathon runner, half marathon, they need that gel. They need that gel right around that 90-minute mark, or else their muscle glycogen is depleted and they'll hit a
Yeah.
wall very quickly. So actually, if you know that you're going to be doing some endurance training for like a 4 hour period, I say have it every hour.
Okay.
It's longer than that hour and a half, so you want it every hour. So the gel is great. Also, this would be electrolyte drink would also be great with some carbohydrate in it. So it's
Mm.
immediately giving you fuel.
What about like, what are your thoughts on, you go into the grocery store and I'm just going to use Cliff Bars, but there's like 100,000 different brands. What are you looking on that nutrition label to tell you, okay, this one's okay? Or do you just avoid that altogether and try to go
I don't
to,
avoid them. I like them because Especially as we look at like adolescents, they constantly are hungry, right? And you need like quick things to just I have two at home, so I know.
Yeah.
So I do so definitely I like packaged foods like that. There are a lot of great ones. There are some that, are a little bit not as great as others, but what am I looking for in those? So it depends. If I am just looking for kind of an easy snack, like between games and they got a little bit of time, I like them to be higher in protein. So I do like them to have somewhere like 12, 15 grams of protein. If it's more of one of these, oh my gosh, it's 30 minutes before we only have like a short period of time, then I want that to be more higher in like carbohydrate. Cliff Bar is great. You don't need that whole one, but maybe half of that Cliff Bar that's like going to give you about 100 calories, and it's going to be like some easy to digest carbohydrate that's going to give you quick energy would be great. Cliff also produces these gummies. I do like the gummies. I talked about the Travis Kelsey
Mhm. Yeah.
thing, but those gummies can be great at halftime or toward the end instead of gels. Some kids don't love gel. It's kind of gross. And
Yeah.
adults are okay with them, but they love gummies, right? So the gummies are helpful for smaller kids, especially if if they have like all day games or they're just trying to um, stay in their peak performance throughout the day. Those are helpful. So I do
Right.
like those, but a lot of bars I like. um, GT Go bars are probably my personal favorite protein bars. You can get them at a lot of stores. I love RX bars. RX bars have fiber, they have protein, and they have some fat in them. So those are just more like meal replacement type, easy things to consume if you've got a couple hours, right? Um, those are probably like my couple favorite ones. Cliff bars
Right.
I would like for, kind of long endurance things,
Yeah.
hiking or, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Talk a little bit more about hydration and,
Yeah.
you know, long bouts and how important it is to, it's not just the hour before that you're, squirting
Right.
Gatorade
Yeah.
water from the bottle into your mouth. It's planning, right?
Yes, it's definitely planning.
Mhm.
I always say that when we look at athletes, you're getting hydrated through various ways. It's not always through water. Okay, you're getting it through your food, you're getting it through some fruits and vegetables, but a good kind of rule of thumb is half of your body weight in ounces. So like in those people who are exactly 130 pounds, 8 glasses of water works great, right? Eight
Right.
glasses of water, but then plus you're going to get some hydration from other sources. For every like hour that you exercise, you want to add in an additional 8 ounces of fluid. So, and 8 ounces of water. If you are like a really big sweater, like you're sweating profusely, it's really hot, you're going to need that extra 8 ounces, possibly 16 ounces, and you're going to need to put some electrolytes in it. So, more importantly, you're going to need about, if you're exercising for an hour in the heat, you're going to need about a gram of sodium, like a sodium tablet or some type of electrolyte drink that has anywhere between 700 milligrams, maybe up to 1,000 or 1 gram of sodium as well.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
then kind of consistently monitoring. I mean, the best way to monitor it is, one, are you thirsty? Two, are you going to the bathroom frequently? If you're going to the bathroom, like check your urine color, like teach your kids this so that they know this at a young age. It should be light. If it's not light, then fix it. And they can monitor that themselves, right? We see
Mhm.
if you go to like tournaments far away, like I've been baseball tournaments in August in Florida. It's awful.
Cool.
And I
Oh,
can go, like over a gallon of water. And I'm like, I haven't gone to the bathroom in hours. So what does that say? Right. I'm just,
right.
I'm not drinking enough. So,
Right.
pay attention. It should be every few hours and it should be, monitoring the color of your urine.
Yep. And then immediately after you're done,
Yes, immediately after too. I like like I said, I like an electrolyte beverage if you've sweat a lot, for sure. There's some really good ones out there for, I mean, like drip drop hydration's great. Liquid IV is great. Noon is great. Liquid IV is going to be higher in carbohydrates. It's going to have some glucose in it. So that's like a really good one for post if you've worked out longer than 90 minutes, like that 90-minute
Mhm.
mark, you're going to want some glucose. Then there's some that don't have glucose in them, like LMNT, which is like more sodium. That could be
Yep.
really good for
I
people,
love that one. Yeah.
yeah, who just sweat a lot, but maybe, they don't need the carbohydrate because they get the carbohydrate from somewhere else, right? So having that is also really good in the heat. Ultima's another good one that I really like, and I actually like this as a daily electrolyte for anybody because it contains a little bit of sodium. It also has magnesium, potassium, calcium, and it's got no sugar in it, but it's a little bit sweetened with monk fruit. So if people aren't necessarily water drinkers, they don't get excited and they have a hard time, getting to their water content. That's some kids. Kind of diluting their water with this is really helpful because it just makes them drink more. They like it. So that's a good one. And you can get it pretty reasonably priced, like 30 to
Mhm.
50 cents a serving in the
Okay.
powder if you buy it in bulk. Yeah.
Gotcha. Um, so people of a certain age nowadays, they can go on Instagram or whatever social media platform, and there's people talking at you about what's best, from a nutrition standpoint and what you should be eating. You should be paleo, you should be vegan, you should be this and that. And I wanted you to get into, how to understand, what's best for you from a nutrition standpoint and how to kind of push that aside at times when it's not valuable information for you personally, I guess is
Right.
the way I'll
Yeah.
kind of put a parameter on that. But yeah, I mean, how do you digest things that come across your feed, so to speak? No pun intended. And how do you figure out what's best for you and what's valuable?
Yeah, so, there's a couple of things to unpack there. One, if you are actually like seeking nutrition advice, and if you're looking at it on social media, that's not always the best avenue. However, there are plenty of really qualified people who have a background in nutrition. I have a pretty big Instagram following, Facebook as well. I'll share some nutrition tips. I'll also share recipes because I have a food website, I have a blog. Um, so you can listen to me, right? Or just make sure whoever you're listening to has some type of credential. They have either like some type of master's degree in nutrition, they are a certified nutrition specialist or a registered dietitian. Um, they have some type of qualification. However, you can still get some pretty good, like anecdotal, um, you can get some good information that people that don't have a nutrition background, but be careful on what you digest. Here's what I have to say about like lifestyle type diets. You mentioned the vegan diet, you mentioned the paleo diet.
Right.
There's the ketogenic diet, there's like macro counting, there's intermittent fasting. All of these ways to eat are more considered lifestyle because they are sustainable for a long period of time. You can follow a certain dietary pattern, and if it's something that you really like and you find it really easy to follow and you feel good with it, then that's probably the right one for you.
Right.
I have had people that have come to work with me and they're like, so I heard that the ketogenic diet is going to like, make my life so much better, blah, 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 blah. But then I find out that they really like, a lot of vegetables and they like a lot of carbohydrates. And I'm like, this is not going to work for you. You're going to have to, this is just, it's very restrictive. So it's not going to work for you. Or, I've had like people who don't eat meat tell me they want to follow a paleo diet. I'm like, also not going to work for you.
Right.
So, so you have to be, so I'm never one to say that a certain dietary pattern is superior to another because it's really not. It depends on the person so much. So, I've had, I mean, I'm a person who consumes animal protein. So obviously um, I do think that protein is one of the best macro. I mean, they're all equally important, but having high protein, over 100, 120 grams for me daily is beneficial to my overall lifestyle, my energy levels, and for my goals. So I would have a really hard time following a plant-based diet eating that much protein. I also know that I'm going to digest animal protein better than I'm going to digest plant-based proteins. It's just how the human body works. But some people feel really good eating only, plants and plant-based things. So I want to support that as well and help them meet their goals in that way. And it's very, personal. The only one place I would say I'm like I have a hard time with it is the carnivore diet. Um, at the end of the day, I love protein, right? But at the end of the day, we have to be consuming antioxidants and we have to be consuming fiber, and we're not going to get that from meat. So if you are eating a diet that is so restrictive and it takes out so many other different food groups, then it's probably not one that's going to be sustainable for a long period of time. The paleo diet sometimes gets a bad rap. I think it's one of the best diets out there, and you can modify it. I mean, you can be a person who, like, I love the paleo style. I love fruits and vegetables. Everything's on the table. I love healthy fats. All of it's on the table. All protein, you can have all that you want. The one thing that it does eliminate is, legumes and grains, which I do like some legumes and grains. So I will eat those sometimes. Do I eat them every day? No, but I add them in there so you can almost do like a modified version of what works for you. But demonizing like dairy too. Like I like some dairy. I think dairy's got some good protein in it. It's got good calcium. It's also got um, other really good essential vitamins and minerals that we aren't getting from other foods. And if you can tolerate some of it, then absolutely. Some people like to put blanket statements on dairy, like, oh, dairy's like totally disrupting my whatever. And you'd be surprised that most people actually don't do well with different types of dairy, but almost every person can have a little bit, and it just depends on the type. Like fermented cheese, right, or aged cheese doesn't require enzymes, or it doesn't require like lactose or lactase to break it down. So you can probably get away with that, but maybe you don't do well with milk, or maybe you don't do well with ice cream, right? But you can maybe have a little bit, and that could add some protein. So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to get to was supplements.
Yeah.
You mentioned, adolescent boys especially, they're trying to gain weight, or there's a million different reasons to explore supplementation, whether it's creatine. You talked about protein powder earlier. Um, it's a it's a big deal, and
Yeah.
maybe talk about some of the pitfalls, some of the things that are good for performance, for to supplement your diet. I'm assuming that most things you would try to get through like whole foods rather than supplementing. So yeah, delve into that.
Okay. Supplements, there's really only like a few that I like blanketly recommend for everybody. One of them is a probiotic. Okay, so this is going to help your gut health. The other one's going to be an omega-3 supplement. And the reason is because I don't really ever see anybody that's consuming fish daily that they're getting enough omega-3s. And omega-3s are so, we see like a lot of so much new research with athletes in recovery and everything. Omega-3s are really beneficial to your brain health, to your heart health, to like reducing the amount of inflammation that we get, because exercise actually does create an inflammatory response. If you're trying to, recover from injury, if you are trying to prevent injury, omega-3s are going to do all of it. It's like a wonder, a really great supplement. So I always recommend at least like a gram or 1,000 milligrams of DHA, EPA, omega-3 supplement. Fish oil basically is what you're consuming. As far as all the others, there's a lot that you can unpack. Creatine is beneficial in some ways, but it has to be used under the right circumstances, and you have to kind of know what you're doing with it. I Unless you're being guided by somebody who knows what they're doing, there's no point to just taking it.
Right.
It can help with some recovery. It can help with it, I mean, it's a little bit complicated on how it helps with muscle building. So you have to be doing it in a way that's very targeted and focused. Otherwise, you're just wasting your money. Um, one of the other one of the other supplements that I also typically recommend to most people is vitamin D, because most Americans are very low in vitamin D, and this is going to help us with creating better bone health, but it also helps our immune system and a couple other things. So vitamin D is also a big one. And we can get into like branched chain amino acids and specific things that are great for athletes, but I typically don't just tell everybody to take it because it
Right.
depends on what their goals were. Leucine is one of our branched chain amino acids, and it's one of the most important amino acids when it comes to muscle recovery, when it comes to muscle building, muscle protein synthesis. So I always say to, if you are consuming, protein powder, and you are, having some goals on trying to do kind of, more getting stronger, more muscle. Leucine is, you don't necessarily need a supplement with it, but making sure you're finding a protein powder that really highlights leucine. It's also great for injury recovery. Um, and it's also great for muscle recovery. So that would be the one that I would say is more of a blanket, like this is great for
Yeah.
others.
Talk about protein powder. That's probably something everybody's at least tried.
Yeah.
I would imagine most people take it fairly regularly,
Yeah. I
athletes
mean, I have
especially.
it every day.
Hmm.
I think it's essential. And why, for most people who are trying to hit goals of, creating more lean muscle tissue, you need to have at least 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight to 2.0. Okay,
Hmm.
so 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if I look at myself, if I'm 65 kilograms, I need to be consuming at least 100 grams of protein per day, and somewhere max like 130. Um, so with that, I have a hard time making those goals if I don't have a protein shake. So what do I look for in a protein shake? There's so many different ones, and they're all going to be pretty good. I really do like a high quality whey protein. I think that it's great for muscle building. It's also high in leucine. This is kind of more standard across the board. I know that some people don't love whey, so there are some really good like plant-based protein powders. Kachava is, a brand that I have at home that I really like. It is a pea protein, but it also has a lot of different nut proteins in them. I do like hemp protein. I also really like, I mentioned casein protein. That's one to take at night. That one's really good. Collagen protein is good for us older folks, as we're trying to protect our bones and our joints. It's really good for healthy skin and hair. And you can get the unflavored. It tastes like absolutely nothing. So if you don't like protein powder and protein shakes, scoop some collagen in like a regular fruit smoothie, and now you have a high protein fruit smoothie rather than a nothing high carbohydrate fruit smoothie. So that's also an easy one. In my house, we actually have a variety. We have at least like 6 different types, and we all have protein shakes every day. So everybody's got kind of something different going on. I got my son who's 14 trying to make sure he's trying to build some muscle. So he has protein shake to start the day in the morning. He likes the plant-based one. It's what his favorite is. And then he has the casein at night. My daughter likes a protein shake because she doesn't have time in the morning. She takes forever to get ready. She's 16. So she likes the plant-based. She just piggybacks off her brother and says, make me double. So she just drinks that. My husband and I do whey. My husband also likes hemp protein, so he'll do that. So we all have kind of like different ways to do it. And then we keep collagen for like an extra. You can put it in your coffee. You can put it in anywhere.
Right. Um, what else on supplementation? We miss anything that needs to be thrown in there?
I'm like
Um,
trying to think. I think
what about,
supplementation is more of like a personal goal. It's kind of it's hard to for me to say you
yeah,
everybody's got to be doing this or this is such a piece of advice besides kind of the main ones that I hit. I would rather people get all of their, all of their vitamins and minerals from food. Okay. The one
hmm
that's you can't get from food, vitamin D is really hard to get from food. Um, omega 3s is really hard to get from food. That's just the way that our diet works. We don't live in Japan or we don't live on the coast of Greece where we're eating these foods every day. So,
right,
that's why I throw that one in there. But other than that, it is such a like personalized thing. I hesitate to say one thing that might not apply to other people. Um,
right.
so that's kind of how I feel about supplements. But there are like plenty of good ones out there. And if you worked with somebody who knew what they were doing with sports nutrition and you had like specific goals, or you actually had a panel that said you were low in something, then definitely you want to take those supplements. There's certain supplements that I would never recommend unless somebody had a specific deficiency and they were told by their doctor. And the reason why is because if you take supplements that you don't necessarily need, but you think it's good for you, you are actually could be blocking and hindering the absorption of other vitamins and minerals. So it could be a dangerous place.
Right. All right. How do you, this is another one from your student. Uh, how do you maintain weight while you're in season?
Maintaining, you gotta eat. So
Yeah.
um, the best thing to do is to actually calculate your estimated energy requirements. So this requires you to kind of look it up, but put in your weight, your height, your age, and you can do this online. There's some good trackers. Just Google estimated energy requirements. Okay. And then or you can also put in total daily energy expenditure. You can put either of
hmm
those in and you can calculate based off of your activity level and you can see like, oh shoot, how many times I work with athletes and they're like, wait, what? I got to be consuming 4,500 calories a day. And I'm like, yes, you do. And they're like, no wonder I can't put on weight or I can't maintain weight. I'm like, yes, this is why. So, just Google that and kind of know where you stand and know what that is. And then from there, start to look at like, is my breakfast big enough? Is this big enough? That tip about eating some protein, eating that casein before you go to bed is going to be huge. Also, the meal timing, like after a workout, we have like a short window called our anabolic window where we are either building muscle or we're breaking it down. So if we just worked out, we don't want to be breaking down a ton of muscle. So you got to add in carbohydrate and protein immediately. Otherwise, you could be missing a big crucial piece to strength and adding in that muscle tissue. So timing, like eating right after and then probably eating again. So a lot of athletes need to eat 5 or 6 times a day. They just need to be consistent. Some of those meals are kind of big.
Right.
So that would be my best
Yeah.
advice.
Do you think does fasting have any place in you know sports performance?
Um,
I'm guessing only in
I
the off season.
no, I like intermittent fasting, especially time restricted eating. I more like it for not my I don't like it at all for adolescents. So any like high school, college, especially males, they're still in growth, so I don't like it. Females, it might be okay, but it also depends on if they're athletes. I usually don't like it. I love it for the standard person, the middle age 30 something, 40 something, 50 something. I think it's really beneficial for, like we're talking about like blood sugar control. It's so good. It can really help it can improve like your sleep. It can improve so many other things. But I just want to caveat that I really don't necessarily like it for young, I especially don't like it for young people and
Okay.
young athletes, maybe after they graduate and they've moved on from their sport and they start to get to their peak mass or what they're happy with, then I would maybe recommend it because there's some really good benefits that we get out of time restricted eating, especially.
Okay. Last thing. I mean, there's a lot of things we can get to, but
Oh, yeah.
what I want to get to lastly today anyway is caffeine. I mean, I have a problem, and so.
I think your
you know,
son does too.
yeah. So I guess I handed that down potentially, but talk about its role in performance, and then the effects it has on adolescents, and they probably start hitting it hard in college, and then you know not only that, but like the energy drinks, the effects that those have, and the dangers of those.
Yeah, so my biggest thing with caffeine is typically, so I actually don't like it for adolescents. Um, and adolescence kind of goes to 1920 is what I'm
Mhm.
really referring to. So if you're a high school age kid, I'm not loving this as an option for you to um try and get peak performance. And why? Because there is some evidence that there's a little bit of growth stunting, and that there could be it could be getting in the way of you hitting some goals. Now, if you're in your low 20s, you're college student 21, 22, and you want to use it to boost performance, there actually is some decent evidence that it does help with boosting performance, but that always comes at a caveat, right? So if we're consuming more than 500 milligrams of caffeine per day, typically 450 really, then we are starting to deplete our fluids and our minerals and our vitamins. So 450 milligrams of coffee is 3 cups per day. So if we're having more than that, we are putting ourselves in possibly like dehydration state. So kind of paying attention to that. Um,
I don't like this at all.
I know, right? So, and other energy drinks, oof, like a lot of them are pretty bad, like Monster Energy or Red Bull, whatever it might be. Those have their own set of problems, but also, like, most importantly, like hydration things, right? We're dehydrating, we're losing fluids, and we're losing really important minerals. We're losing important micronutrients that we don't need to be. So that's the biggest problem. Little shots of caffeine before you perform something can be good though. And we see that it does boost performance because it's basically helping our VO2 max or a little bit of endurance, and it's also helping us to reach a little bit like higher level of creating more energy to boost us through a performance. So it's definitely okay, and it can be used in the right space.
Okay. So moderation, in other words,
Moderation.
be
Yeah.
reasonable.
Right. Yeah.
Don't rely on it.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Um, well, cool. So we're coming up on an hour, and I'd like to try to keep him at an hour, but I hope that we can get you back and talk about more. Maybe we can get some more kids to ask questions, and you
Yes.
can field those. So, all right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
thank you very much. Here,
Hey,
I'll hit
thank you.
stop.
It was fun.
Yeah. Hold on one second.